Hello and welcome to Gutted. I'm Aleece.
And I'm Tony, and we're here to spill our guts about Halloween.
How do you gut someone? Always trust my gut. Happy Halloween!
I can't hear myself. I'm wearing a mask, so if you're listening to this and you can't see my face, I'm wearing a very budget Michael Myers mask.
Yeah, Tony, who are you right now?
I am supposed to be Michael Myers, but in reality,
You're Tony!
I'm Corey dressed as Michael Myers, but Corey could only afford the budget Amazon version of Michael, so it looks pretty bad. Sorry, Corey.
That's his starter mask. He's just starting out.
And you look fantastic right now.
Thank you.
For those not watching, Aleece is wearing a white, oversized men's dress shirt with a yellow shawl. And you probably can't see this in the YouTube video, but the mustard yellow thigh-high, knee-high socks as well.
Nice. And I also have on clogs.
And clogs. So yes, she is playing Annie from the 1978 Halloween film.
Yep.
A costume you've been wanting to do for years.
I have, because I have this blanket that looks like Annie's blanket, and she is my favorite character in Halloween.
So the costume was based off the blanket.
I mean, it was based off of her being my favorite character. And then I saw this blanket and I was like, yep, now I get to be Annie.
So we are dressed as our favorite characters, Corey and Annie, from the different ends of the spectrum of Halloween.
Yeah.
I am literally from the last Halloween movie Ends, and you are from the first Halloween.
First one. I didn't think of that because I was thinking I wanted a couple's costume. I wanted to be Annie. I thought, well, I guess Tony could be Paul, but then what does he dress up as, a phone?
Also, like, I'm a pretty budget Corey. This was definitely a last minute. What do I have in the closet? So I probably don't resemble Corey at all. Yeah. Although I am Corey in spirit.
Yeah, he's Corey in spirit.
Yeah.
You have the black jacket on. Close enough.
All right. Happy Halloween, everybody.
So let's do our little mini dive into the 1978.
I'm excited.
Good.
I met this 6-year-old child with this blank, pale, emotionless face and the blackest eyes, the devil's eyes. I spent 8 years trying to reach him, and then another 7 trying to keep him locked up, because I realized that what was living behind that boy's eyes was purely and simply evil.
Quick question, Tony. Halloween 78. When did you first see this film?
I will admit that I was never a huge Michael Myers fan. Yeah, I mean, when I was a teenager, I was always a big Jason Voorhees and Freddy Krueger fan, and also Chucky. Michael Myers I had always known about, but I wasn't really super into Michael Myers. So it wasn't until later, when I was a young adult in college, did I actually see 1978 Halloween seriously.
I don't think I knew that. Wait, was this the first Halloween that you had seen, or did you see others first?
I'd probably seen H2O at some point, because that came out when we were in high school.
Yeah.
And it was probably on cable TV at the time. But I mean, Halloween is one of those movies, and there are a lot of movies like this for me personally, where it might have been on TV and I might have, watched a little bit of it, watched half of it here, watched a little bit there. So I knew about it. I wasn't like totally in the dark, but I didn't really view it as like, oh my God, this is like the best movie ever. It wasn't until I had matured as a horror fan, because I think when I was younger, I was just watching things randomly, and I didn't really appreciate some of the bigger franchise. Like, I hadn't seen The Exorcist for a long time, and I hadn't seen Halloween. So it wasn't until I was a bit older in college, and I actually studied some of the scenes in classes that I was in, and I was like,
really?
I was like, whoa, okay, I need to give this a second look. And I finally did, and I was just completely blown away. I mean, it's like, you can say it's a perfect movie. How about you? I mean, I don't want to get too far into it just yet, but
I have to say I'm shocked. I don't think I ever knew this about you.
I think because you have always been a Halloween super fan.
Yeah.
And
I just like ignored your,
yeah, exactly.
your history.
I know, because I was thinking about that. I was like, oh, I don't know when the first time we watched it together was. We must have been like already together for a long time, and maybe it just wasn't spoken about.
I mean, like it was one of my first DVDs that I ever purchased. I found it at a garage sale. It was like the 25th anniversary DVD. And I was like, whoa, lucky me. And so I just assumed that Tony loved it. I never even asked him if he liked it. It's like, of course he loves it. I love it.
I mean, I eventually came to love it.
Huh. Interesting.
And it's now one of my favorite horror movies.
See, guys, you can be with somebody for over 20 years and still learn things. That's cool.
So this is the first DVD. I mean, we obviously didn't see this in theaters. We are not of that age.
No.
This is more of a movie that maybe our parents would have gone to see in theaters.
And actually, I think I did have a VHS copy of this.
Okay.
At one point in high school.
Okay, so you saw this in high school.
I think I actually saw it younger than that because this was one of the first horror movies I had seen with my cousins, and we started watching them fairly young in elementary school. So I
watched and remembered, whereas I may have watched it. I don't know if I remember it.
Yeah, no, it was really impactful. I feel like we probably did watch this either late elementary or early middle school. And I remember laughing at certain scenes that I don't really think are that funny anymore. Like the scene where she's searching for her keys in her really tight bell-bottom jeans. And she's like screaming at Tommy to like open the door, and she can't get her keys. And she's actually narrating her action. She's like, the keys.
That sounds hilarious.
Okay, my cousins and I thought it was funny. We're like, ha ha, she can't find her keys.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's stupid. But it's interesting how like, your perception or your viewing of a movie evolves over time. So that was the initial viewing. And then over time, I started to appreciate it more and more, love the score. And then I started wanting to watch other John Carpenter movies. I loved Assault on Precinct 13. The Fog was a big one.
This movie has that effect. And I think when it came out, it also had that effect because it inspired an entire wave of slasher films. It may not have been the first slasher film, but is definitely one of the more influential that went on to inspire Friday the 13th. And then after that, just like every like killing teens having campgrounds
sex.
And summer, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah. And I don't even think that was John Carpenter's intention was to kill the teens having sex. I think it was just like, that just happened to be that.
Right. And John Carpenter wasn't even the first to sort of do the things that he was doing. The whole sort of point of view of the killer steady cam, like we saw that in Black Christmas before Halloween came out. So the techniques weren't necessarily new, and the idea of a slasher wasn't new, but something about the movie itself just had a profound impact on a lot of horror viewers.
It just had a perfect simplicity to it.
So I was going to ask you, what is it about Halloween that makes it work so well?
It's not overcomplicated. And as the franchise goes on, you will see that they get very complicated, and they might not be our favorites. Or they might for other reasons. But this one is just so simple. And it's these three teens hanging out. Or it's three girls and they're hanging out maybe on Halloween. They're having basic conversations that high schoolers have. And there's just a guy that sees Laurie Strode drop off a key under the mat, and he follows her. And that's it. There's no backstory behind why he's following Laurie. He sees her put a key under the mat, and it's like, okay, let's go follow that one. It's not until later you start getting some backstory that didn't really need to be there.
None of it really John Carpenter's vision. I think John Carpenter would have been happy if this was a standalone movie, and actually intended on the series to be an anthology series, as we also later see. Yeah, I agree with you. I think the thing about this movie is the combination of all the elements together. Its simplicity, but it's effective in the way that it creates terror without really showing gore. It's a sort of the silent stalker. It's the score, it's the mood, the atmosphere.
Yeah.
The dialogue is really natural.
And I think that's what I like about the acting in the movie is that it's not like Meryl Streep gonna, sob your eyes out, but it's very naturalistic teenager dialogue, which I think Deborah Hill had a huge part in that.
definitely. Yeah. We get some very memorable lines from like PJ Souls saying like totally.
Totally. Totally. And in fact, there's one scene where she's talking to Lori and it turns out that no one's going to be back at the house that PJ Souls is at for the rest of the night. And she's like, I'm definitely going to have a good time. And I was like, whoa, you said definitely, not totally. It really threw me off. That's not a key plot point at all. It's always bothered me though. So
yeah.
just want everyone to know when she says we definitely will, it should have been totally.
Nancy Loomis as Annie, something about it, just like the way that teenagers act, and you can really relate to these characters.
I feel like she's like the original Juno.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So you don't hate the characters. The characters are not annoying. So you care for the characters. Also, like with Michael Myers, he's not doing much. He's just kind of like standing around watching.
Yeah.
And what's scarier than that?
The movie starts with him in the beginning as a 6-year-old boy, and he's being babysat by his sister Judith and her, I guess, boyfriend, her no-name boyfriend. And they go upstairs to have premarital sex. And after the boyfriend leaves, Michael goes up there and stabs her to death. When the parents come home, it's just, Michael, what did you do? And then a slow pan back to show the parents just kind of looking at Michael. They look like a typical middle-class family.
It's not Rob Zombie's
It's
Halloween.
not the Rob Zombie family.
I don't know if there had been movies up to that point that had had too many of these sort of child killers. So the very start of the movie and the premise is really chilling and scary because it's just like, what's this kid's motivation? And then you don't really get any. You just know that this kid has been locked away in a sanitarium or, you know, a mental facility.
Smith Grove Sanitarium, right?
A sanitarium, yeah, where he was treated by Dr. Loomis, who was trying to figure out why this kid was evil and spent 18 years with
15 years.
15 years with him and couldn't figure it out.
And he said that he would see Michael looking at the wall, looking past the wall, looking to this night. Like he's just been waiting. He's like the most patient human being in the world. Human is debatable. But Loomis, played by Donald Pleasance, who we will see in many more Halloween movies. This is not his one-shot deal.
And then we have Laurie Strode. So this is Jamie Lee Curtis's first film.
She had a couple acting projects before. They might have been TV shows.
Jamie Lee Curtis, the daughter of Janet Leigh and Tony Curtis. She was cast in this movie and just really gave that extra dimension to this babysitter, Laurie Strode character. She had sort of like a maturity about her.
She has like an old soul. She's wise beyond her years. She never goes on dates. She says, guys think I'm too smart. And Annie says, I don't. I think you're a wacko. Typical friend response. But she is just kind of an introvert. And I think she does have a bit of an old soul.
She's brave. She protects the children, all that sort of stuff. She is a fighter.
She's a fighter. She's a Girl Scout. She is a problem solver. Yeah.
So yeah, where would Halloween be without Jamie Lee Curtis playing Laurie Strode?
Yeah. And we're not going to do this for all the movies, but we just want to go over a few of the best scenes in 1978's Halloween.
Aleece, what are some of your favorite scenes from Halloween 1978?
Okay, so many, but I tried really hard to whittle these down to just a few. The first one in chronological order, Laurie and Annie driving in Annie's car.
I plan on making popcorn and watching Dr. Dementia. 6 straight hours of horror movies. Little Lindsay Wallace won't know what hit her.
Annie's so cool. She hands Laurie a joint and they smoke weed. Laurie immediately coughs on it. And then Annie rolls up and sees her dad, who's the sheriff, Sheriff Brackett, outside the hardware store. And I'm thinking, Annie, why do you stop? But she does because she's so cool. And she rolls down the window and she's like, hey, Dad. He's like, hey, some kids broke in the hardware store. And he's like shouting. And then he keeps like shouting and then the alarm turns off and he's like continuing to shout. Anyway, and he's like, oh, he shouts too. It's so hard living with a cynical father. Anyway, it's such a cute scene because we see this cute little relationship between Annie and Sheriff Brackett, but there's somebody behind them and we can see this other car behind them throughout this entire interaction. And it's Michael Myers in the station wagon. Over the radio, they're playing Don't Fear the Reaper by Blue Oyster Cult. It's like the whole scene. There's no score to cue you that it's creepy. It's just the radio. It's two friends talking, doing teenage things, and meeting one of the dads.
They've been walking home and Michael's been like, hiding behind hedges and all that. And
yeah, just kind of skulking, just trying to see what they're doing. What's their day to day? Yeah.
One of my favorite scenes is always the scene where Michael decides to put a ghost costume on with the glasses to impersonate Bob.
What's the matter? Can I get your ghost, Bob?
Yeah, that's pretty cute.
Because it's just so unexpected. And we see this throughout the franchise where Michael does these things that it kind of has you scratching your head where you're like, he had to plan out these extra steps or do this thing. And it's kind of silly. But that's part of Michael's charm is that, Michael doesn't talk. So Michael has to express himself in other ways.
Like maybe he has a sense of humor, which would be so interesting. Like this psycho murderer who doesn't speak actually has a sense of humor.
Yeah. Well, this is definitely one of the more humorous moments in the franchise.
Yeah.
And the teens, they're having sex and then one leaves to go get the beer and then comes back. But it's Michael. You know the scene.
Yeah.
That's always one of my favorite scenes. I chuckle every single time.
I like that one too.
How about that final scene, Aleece? You always talk about the score and the sort of like climax of the movie.
Okay. Yes. The final scene, I think if I had to pick one scene or sequence that was my favorite, it's that final moment after Laurie has been fighting in the closet. We all know the infamous closet scene, but that's not my favorite scene. It's right after the closet scene, after she tells Tommy Doyle and Lindsay Wallace to go run down the street and scream their little heads off. And she's going to stay at the house. I don't know why she decides to stay at the house, but she does. And she has her back to Michael, who's laying on the ground. And we just see Laurie looking exhausted. And then Michael sits up in that iconic, very mechanical way. And then he mechanically turns his head and looks at her. And the score starts, the dun-dun, dun-dun.
The score
Ding,
plays
ding,
such
ding,
a huge part of it too. Yeah.
So good, especially that little ding, 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 ding. That's my favorite part of the score. And he's slowly walking towards her and she starts walking towards the camera. And then that's when he gets her and they get in a scuffle. She rips off his mask. We see his face briefly, the only time in the whole movie. And then Loomis comes in blasting, saving the day. For now.
That scene has become iconic. So many movies try to capture the tension that John Carpenter achieves here in this movie, in this chase, in the scenes where Michael kind of just sort of appears out of a shadow. So many great things.
Yeah.
It doesn't get tiring watching it. You can watch it over and over again.
It's such a good sequence. And he interspersed it with the shot of the little kids running down the street screaming. And that's how Loomis knows where to go because he sees Tommy and Lindsay screaming from the house.
Yeah.
It's just a really well edited scene.
A master class, as they say, in building tension without having to use gore.
Yeah.
So,
well done,
bravo.
Mr. Carpenter.
So let's move on to our awards for Halloween 1978. Aleece, let's start us off. What awards are you giving to 1978?
All right. It's actually a tough one for me. So for the Golden Gut, I'm going to give it to, it's really hard, honestly, because I love this movie so much. It's a perfect movie. I think I have to give it to the director, to John Carpenter, obviously. But Silver Spleen, a close second would be Nancy Loomis as Annie. Because I do love that character so much. But
great character, and unfortunately, she meets her demise.
I believe now she goes by Nancy Keys, but at the time of filming, she went by Nancy Loomis, which I always love that tie-in with the Loomis name. Carpenter for the overall film, the vision, the score, but then close second, Silver Spleen goes to Annie. How about you?
For my Golden Gut Award for Halloween 1978, of course, yes, I am going to give this to John Carpenter, the mastermind who did the score and just kind of brought together all of the elements, the mood, the tension, the performances. And of course, he had help from Deborah Hill
and a whole team.
I'm actually sharing this award with John Carpenter and with Jamie Lee Curtis playing Laurie Strode, because Laurie Strode, aside from Michael Myers, is sort of the face of this franchise, even though she's not in a lot of the movies. She's
in several, but she's not in most.
Yeah. So even though she still is so synonymously connected to these movies, that I'm giving my Golden Gut Award to John Carpenter and Jamie Lee Curtis playing Laurie Strode, with my silver spleen going to John Carpenter's score, because I think that is just as iconic as the movie.
Yeah.
And it is the score that I would probably most likely listen to without watching the movie, just casually.
Yep. And we have...
Did you want to give the axe to anything?
No. I would be hard pressed to find something. Oh, wait, I think I did say there's like one line. Oh, yeah. PJ Soul's line when she says, "We definitely will."
You're giving that the axe. You're going to change it to totally.
I just want to change it. She just needs to say, "We totally will." That's all I wanted her to say.
A minor detail to an otherwise perfect movie.
Exactly. Axe for you? Anything?
I had nothing. I was just like, no
notes.
I'm good.
No notes.
Yeah, you can even leave the palm trees that you can clearly see visible in Haddonfield, Illinois.
It's not until I saw several making of featurettes that I realized there were even palm trees in the movie.
But that's how good John Carpenter is you don't notice that the stuff's going on.
Yeah, I bought it. I was like, wow, it looks so nice and fall-ish, and like with the leaves rustling. And then finding out they're like throwing bags of leaves, and they had to find like the 2 pumpkins in town because they filmed it in like summertime. Anyway.
Yeah. If you have not seen Halloween 1978, then please treat yourself to watch this movie. It's an absolute classic. We showed our niece this movie
she laughed at
a year ago. Yeah, she said it was kind of boring. Whatever. She's going to appreciate that in due time.
She will. She'll come back around because she's a teenager now. She said it was boring.
Trying to play
silly.
it cool. I'm not scared of Michael Myers.
Yeah.
Okay.
she'll come around. That was a mini-sode of Halloween from 1978. Tune in next week as we do deep mini dives into Halloween's 2 through 13, ending with the David Gordon Green Halloween Ends.
Deep mini dive?
That's a deep mini dive. It's little, but still diving into it. Thank you and happy Halloween.
Thanks for listening and watching. This has been another episode of Got It.